Some people spend their entire lives believing that dedication always guarantees an immediate reward, but I had to learn the hard way that life does not operate on fairness. For 60 months, my entire existence was completely consumed by the exhausting demands of looking after an aging parent whose health was rapidly failing. I cast aside my own dreams, forfeited hard-earned career advancements, and completely forgot what a vacation felt like just to ensure he had everything he needed. My sibling was completely absent during this grueling journey, yet she was the one who walked away with absolutely everything when his final wishes were made public. My name is Abigail Vance, and at 36 years old, I discovered that true devotion is often met with the most unexpected outcomes. My father began slipping away shortly after he celebrated his 71st birthday, starting with minor lapses in memory and missed medication doses before escalating into serious medical emergencies. Before I even realized what was happening, his daily survival became a monumental task that required constant supervision, and that heavy burden fell squarely onto my shoulders. It was not a role I ever actively campaigned for, but when a parent needs help, you do not stop to ask questions. Every single Monday and Wednesday morning, I would pull into his driveway to chauffeur him to various specialist appointments and physical therapy sessions. My weekends were entirely dedicated to scrubbing his floors, managing his complex medical bills, and prepping healthy meals to keep his strength up for the upcoming week. Whenever the hospital called in the middle of the night with an urgent update, my smartphone was always the one that buzzed on the nightstand. I watched romance opportunities vanish into thin air and stepped away from lucrative corporate promotions because my time was simply no longer my own. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Chloe, was living a life of absolute luxury and freedom nearly 2,000 miles away in a sunny coastal city. Her digital footprint was filled with images of pristine beaches, fancy cocktail hours, and weekend getaways that looked entirely detached from our harsh reality. Whenever our father asked if she might be planning a trip home to see him, she always manufactured a convenient excuse to stay away. She claimed her corporate job was too demanding, flights were far too expensive, or the timing was just slightly inconvenient for her busy schedule. During those 5 agonizing years of his physical decline, she managed to grace us with her presence maybe 3 brief times, and never for more than 48 hours. My father never uttered a single word of criticism regarding her absence and would fiercely defend her behavior whenever relatives questioned her lack of support. He constantly reminded me that she was building her own life and doing the absolute best she could under her current circumstances. I never argued with him about it because I knew he simply wanted to maintain an illusion of family harmony. As time marched on, our extended family members began to notice who was actually doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes. They witnessed me driving him to early morning treatments and sitting by his bedside for hours during his lengthy hospital stays. On several occasions, an aunt or an uncle would pull me aside to whisper about how incredibly fortunate my father was to have me around. I always appreciated their kind words, but I genuinely never expected a financial reward for simply doing what I believed was right. When my father finally passed away quietly on a crisp November morning, I was the one holding his fragile hand as he took his very last breath. His memorial service was deeply moving, filled with old neighbors, lifelong friends, and former colleagues who wanted to honor the incredible man he had been. A week after we laid him to rest, the entire family gathered inside a cold, formal conference room at a downtown legal office for the reading of the estate. The room was thick with unexpressed tension as everyone waited to see how things would shake out. Chloe marched into the room wearing a stunning designer blazer, exuding an overwhelming sense of confidence that felt incredibly inappropriate for the somber occasion. The estate attorney adjusted his spectacles, cleared his dry throat, and began reading the formal document in a steady, monotonous voice. The initial paragraphs covered standard legal jargon, but the atmosphere completely shifted when he reached the actual distribution of his properties. The family residence went entirely to Chloe, the primary investment portfolios went to Chloe, and every single cent of his liquid savings went to her. The entire conference room plummeted into a stunned, breathless silence as dozens of judgmental eyes immediately locked onto my face to gauge my reaction. Across the polished mahogany table, Chloe struggled to conceal a triumphant grin that was slowly spreading across her face as she celebrated her massive victory. The attorney finished reading the final page and slowly closed the thick leather folder, signaling that the meeting was officially over. Instead of breaking down or shouting, I calmly reached into my leather purse and placed a thick wax-sealed envelope onto the table. Before anyone moves an inch, I need to present this because Dad specifically requested that I share it with everyone today, I stated in a quiet voice. The entire room grew even quieter as everyone stared intently at the mysterious white paper sitting directly in the center of the table. Even the seasoned attorney looked completely caught off guard by the unexpected interruption, and the smug smile instantly vanished from my sister's face. Chloe narrowed her eyes and demanded to know what I was doing, but I ignored her and slid the document toward the lawyer. The attorney carefully inspected the front of the envelope, recognizing my father's distinct, shaky handwriting that explicitly instructed the contents to be opened only after the will was read. He sliced the paper open with a silver letter opener, unfolded a multi-page handwritten letter, and began reading the words aloud to the room. If you are hearing these words, it means my family is gathered together, and Abigail is likely feeling incredibly confused by my financial decisions, the letter began. Every single person in the room leaned forward in total anticipation. The lawyer continued reading my father's words, explaining that his final decision was absolutely not a reflection of who loved him more during his final years. My throat tightened with intense emotion as the letter described how I had selflessly sacrificed my youth, energy, and personal aspirations to care for him without ever asking for praise. Across the table, Chloe shifted uncomfortably in her leather chair, her confident posture completely deflating as the attorney read on. The letter stated that while he loved Chloe, there were certain hard truths that could no longer be ignored. The narrative took an unexpected turn when the letter revealed that a person can deeply love their family but still entirely fail to show up when it matters most. Chloe lowered her gaze to the floor, unable to meet anyone's eye as the lawyer flipped to the next page of the document. Suddenly, the attorney's facial expression completely changed, and a look of genuine astonishment washed over his face as he scanned the next paragraph. The letter boldly declared that the estate listed in the traditional will did not represent his true wealth. A wave of audible confusion rippled through the gathered relatives as the lawyer adjusted his glasses to read the next crucial revelation. Exactly 7 years ago, long before his health began to fail, my father had quietly established an entirely private, independent trust. My heart began to hammer against my ribs because nobody in the family had ever uttered a single word about a hidden trust. This specific entity contained substantial assets that were completely separate from the public estate, including international investments and commercial real estate holdings. Chloe's head snapped upward in total shock as the attorney revealed that the sole trustee and exclusive controlling beneficiary of this massive trust was Abigail Vance. The room absolutely erupted into frantic whispering. My aunts gasped in disbelief, and Chloe looked completely paralyzed by the sudden turn of events. The lawyer opened a secondary folder containing the official, notarized trust documents that proved everything was legally ironclad and completely beyond dispute. I sat there in absolute disbelief as the full weight of the situation finally washed over me. The letter explained that my father had chosen this specific structure with deliberate intent because an ordinary inheritance only requires a person to spend money. A private trust, however, requires immense judgment, unwavering responsibility, and a proven track record of long-term stewardship that cannot be bought. Tears began streaming down my face, not because of the immense wealth, but because I realized my father had noticed every single late-night emergency and every single sacrifice I thought had gone entirely unseen. According to the final lines of the letter, I had spent 5 years proving that I could be trusted with the heaviest responsibilities, and trust is infinitely more valuable than gold. Absolutely nobody dared to interrupt, argue, or even shift in their seats as the reading came to a natural close. My father expressed hope that this decision would not cause a permanent rift, but he wanted both of his daughters to understand that love and trust are measured differently. When the lawyer finally stopped speaking, a heavy silence settled over the room, and Chloe eventually looked up to meet my gaze with eyes full of profound regret. I easily could have rubbed my victory in her face or made a dramatic scene to humiliate her in front of the entire family. Instead, I quietly folded the legal papers and placed them back into my purse because creating a scene would completely miss the lesson. The entire experience was never about proving my sister wrong or seeking revenge for her absence. It was about understanding a profound truth that my father had spent his final years trying to teach both of us before he departed. Material wealth can easily be handed down through a legal document, but genuine trust is something that must be earned through action. My sister walked away from that room with a standard inheritance that made her financially wealthy for the time being. The immense trust my father placed in my hands made me incredibly grateful, and in the end, that mattered so much more.